That will be good for the people online. So sorry for that. But yes, thank you to Elcano. Thank you also to the European Investment Bank. We've been working together on a number of issues over the years. And currently also looking into economic security together. So it's very good to have that collaboration. And of course, thank you, Nadia, Calviño. We just discussed you were here before, but it's a while ago. You were here as a commissioner, but you certainly don't need any introduction here in Brussels. And also in Spain, where you've had a long career in government as well. We're very glad you're here now as the president of the European Investment Bank, which certainly is a very important institution going forward. And I'm looking forward to also exploring what the bank can do in the next political cycle, what role it can play. But before we get into the discussion, we'll start with a keynote speech. So the floor is yours. Thank you.
Is it now working? Yes. Okay. So good morning, dear colleagues, amigos, amigas, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I am delighted to have a chance to come back to the European Policy Center and the Elcano to cooperate. It's been quite difficult to find a date where we could all be here, and it so happens that we are meeting as so many citizens are going to the polls these days. We see that some countries have already started the voting process. It will be in most countries during the weekend. And so I can only say that we did really find the best possible date to hold these debates. So congratulations to EPC and Elcano for being, spot on the issues to be discussed. And like those of us here today, the people that are voting in the European Parliament election are coming from different countries. They hold different political beliefs and visions, different concerns. But I am deeply convinced that this diversity is not a sign of weakness. It is actually one of the main strengths of our European Union. And come Monday, whatever happens in the elections, we will still chart our future together in the spirit of unity, determination, and solidarity. These are the three principles that have guided our decisions in the last years and through the decades. And I think they have proven to be the key elements to our resilience. And that's what gives me a lot of confidence that we all agree on the basic challenges, we agree on the basic priorities, and if we follow these principles, we will be able to face those challenges in a successful manner. As I was saying, I am quite convinced that we all agree on the basic challenges, on the diagnosis, and in all the think tank events that you are participating and the different papers that are being produced, I think the diagnosis is actually quite shared, quite common. The past 5 years since the previous European election have been certainly challenging, with the pandemic, geopolitical tensions, the rise of energy prices and inflation, the unfolding tech revolution from electric cars to artificial intelligence, and the accelerating impact of climate change. And I am certain that most European citizens and leaders can agree in what we want to achieve in response to these challenges. We all want to safeguard Europe's prosperity, to make sure that our economies remain productive, competitive, and innovative. We all want good jobs and high quality services for European people, from healthcare to education and housing. And this is underpinning the European way of life. Citizens want to preserve the European way of life. And I believe that almost all of us can agree that we want a safer Europe and a livable planet for ourselves and our children. And this is the only way to secure our food supply, and agricultural production to protect our infrastructure and to build a better future. And this is also underpinning the European way of life. Of course, there are different parties and different candidates who want to represent us at the European institutions, and they might have different views on how to achieve these goals. And this is the essence of democracy, actually. Disagreement does not need to lead to division. And my confidence in the path ahead and the fact that we will continue to be united and forge a future together, this confidence is grounded on two reasons. First, opinions differ, but the facts don't change. And if there is one fact that we have learned in the past 5 years since the last European election, is that unity pays off. Unity paid off when we joined our forces in financing the development, the procedure, the procurement, the purchase, and the distribution together of life-saving vaccines, providing solutions to ensure European recovery. And by the way, a moment of the advertisement of the EIB, we were financing the research of BioNTech that led to the development of that vaccine. So the European Investment Bank has been a player in there. Unity paid off when we pooled resources to stem the economic fallout from the pandemic with joint instruments, such as the Recovery and Resilience Facility, which provided a solid basis for our rebound, boosting investment and avoiding an investment gap such as the one we suffered after the great financial crisis in 2008, boosting investment all through the EU, boosting reforms, and also the twin green and digital transition so that we could build back better. Unity paid off when we showed determination in the face of Russia's aggression against Ukraine, and we saved our economies from blackouts, and we avoided the worst case scenarios that most analysts expected. You know, with hindsight, it's easy to see that we did the right thing, and that we have been driving the right policies, and we have averted the worst case scenarios. But you are living, and I certainly have lived, and I'm living on a daily basis, how so many people are just seeing the worst case scenarios as unavoidable, as certain, you know, as we look ahead. And this again was thanks to our common tools like the Repower EU plan. Of course, the European Investment Bank, goes without saying, has played a very important role in providing these solutions and supporting European policies and supporting the European economy in these critical situations. Our EIB investment report shows that European companies continue to show remarkable resilience to a series of overlapping crises and challenges. And it is precisely thanks to these well-designed, well-coordinated, well-implemented joint European tools. And throughout these turbulent years, the European Investment Bank group has shown that it is a powerful joint instrument to deliver on European priorities. Every day, as we speak, we are putting Europe's capital to work, fostering innovation, productivity, security, and strategic autonomy. I was saying, as we speak, since I joined the European Investment Bank, I've seen how we are supporting the production of steel made here in Europe, in Sweden, with almost zero emissions. In Italy, we're supporting the construction of Europe's biggest solar panel manufacturing factory. In Poland, we are backing the deployment of dual-use satellites that will help keep citizens safe. We're helping consolidate Spain as the renewables country. Just to mention a few, you know, in Bulgaria, we're supporting agriculture and SMEs, likewise in Romania. Across Europe, from the Iberian Peninsula to the Baltics and from the Mediterranean to the North Sea, we are deploying new renewable energy capacity and upgrading electricity grids and interconnectors. So the second reason for my confidence comes from my own experience in government and now at the helm of the European Investment Bank over the last 6 months. Because you see our shareholders, the 27 member states from different parts of the political spectrum, all of them agree that projects such as the ones I mentioned make a tangible difference for our citizens, for businesses, and for Europe's future. They are also agreeing that the European Investment Bank Group should play a key role, a strategic role, in boosting growth, prosperity, technological and social progress in individual member states across the whole EU and around the world. And we don't just agree on the past and the present, because in my tour of capitals, I have seen how our shareholders welcome the clear list of strategic priorities that should guide the European Investment Bank Group going forward. I expect our shareholders to approve actually this strategic roadmap in the meeting on the 21st of June, so a bit later this month. Dialogue forges consensus, and going forward, our financial tools and resources will focus in the following 8 areas that reflect the strategic roadmap, the value added, the strong points of the EIB, and also the priorities that the different ministers and prime ministers have been conveying to me in these last 6 months. First, we will consolidate the European Investment Bank's position as the climate bank. We are determined to meet the objective of supporting 1 trillion in green investment in the critical decade up to 2030. We will continue to commit at least half of our investments to climate action and sustainability. This is an area where we have a clear value added, and Europe has really no choice but to move ahead and make this a great success. Secondly, we will accelerate Europe's digitalization and technological innovation, launching new financial instruments to boost investment in chips, in artificial intelligence, in life sciences, in advanced materials, in critical raw materials, etc. Third, we are already stepping up our support for Europe's security and defense industry. We have already updated our lending framework and internal processes with a one-stop shop, a single window, a dedicated office, with the goal to accelerate funding and reinforcing Europe's peace and security, while safeguarding, of course, our financing capacity. Fourth, we will remain a strong financing power for cohesion regions. Almost half of the EIB's lending inside the EU is already being channeled to the cohesion regions, not only cohesion, also regions in transition. And we are absolutely committed to the convergence of living standards and supporting those regions that need, more than anything, the support of Europe. Moreover, we will also deploy innovative financing solutions for agriculture and the bioeconomy. Europe's farmers can count on the support of the European Union. They can count on the support of the European Investment Bank to secure Europe's food supply and autonomy, and accompany them in becoming more efficient and supporting and making again the green transition a success. Our priorities also include social infrastructures, including healthcare, education, and affordable housing. And the experience of the past 5 years, from the pandemic to the cost of living crisis in almost all member states, this experience has demonstrated that these sectors need much more investment and tailored support. Finally, in terms of our investment priorities, the European Investment Bank's activities outside the EU will prioritize impact. Last year, we invested around 88 billion euros, and 10% of this, around 8 billion euros, was invested outside the EU. I am making this point because many people maybe don't know that we are also a proud and an important member of the International Multilateral Development Bank family. Of course, right now, we need to start with Ukraine. Next week, I will be in the Berlin conference to sign some agreements and accelerate the deployment of projects on the ground. Of course, the enlargement process is going to be a top priority for the next Commission and the next Parliament. Neighborhood countries, East and South neighborhood, Africa, our neighboring continent, and global gateway projects and strategic alliances around the world, also to ensure that Europe has a strong voice in this brave new world which is in the making. So last but not least, building on our strengths and using the European Investment Bank's resources, expertise, and our privileged position in capital markets, we will also pioneer the reinforcement of the capital markets union. I mean, with a 600 billion euro balance sheet, a very robust portfolio, extremely low non-performing assets, the issuance of bonds under a European, with a Europe signature, and with a AAA rating. I sometimes make the joke, it's only half joking, that we have a AAA because there's no higher rating, but we have a very solid, a very strong AAA rating. I think that actually the European Investment Bank is in itself a capital market union instrument, because it is bringing together, is providing the bridge between public-private, between savings and investments on the ground throughout the whole EU, ensuring a level playing field for European companies. So we, going forward, need to pioneer the deepening and enlargement of the capital markets union, bringing together public and private players of a European and national scope. And I believe these 8 priorities contain the key elements that will, in turn, define European policymaking in the next institutional cycle. And I am convinced that we will also find the consensus to stay on track after these elections. I'm really looking forward to engaging with our partners, with our stakeholders, to put these priorities into action in support of Europe's policy goals. Because I think that the turbulent 5 years that we have left behind since the last European elections show us that we need more Europe, not less, to protect the European Union as a privileged space of security, stability, and prosperity, a beacon to the rest of the world, to look after our communities and boost our young and innovative businesses, because we face common challenges, and the most effective way to confront them is to choose the path of solidarity. As I said at the beginning of my remarks, unity pays off. So thank you, and remember to use your vote.
Thank you very much for those opening remarks. And it's good to hear a positive take on what we're looking ahead to. But maybe I'll start with a little bit of a challenging question, because you were talking about that we broadly agree on the priorities, but of course we don't know the results yet. But there's a very likely strengthening of some of the forces which have a very different narrative about the European Union, who will also argue that many of the things which the European Union is doing is not what we should be focusing on at the European level. So how far do you think that political shift is going to influence the priorities of the Union in the coming period?
Well, yeah. Hi. Yes. So, yeah, that I think is the $100 million question that we're all asking ourselves. Will something change dramatically after the elections? And what I was sharing with you is precisely the result of a reflection on that. Member states, well, we're awaiting the formation of one government in one member state. There are elections all the time in one or another European country, in one or another region. There will be changing governments going forward. Of course, the European Parliament may change. I hope it continues to have a very strong pro-European majority that will support these shared policies going forward, and to continue the path that we have initiated in the last years. But at the end of the day, and that's what I was focusing on, facts matter, and reality is very stubborn. And actually, the reality shows that united we're stronger, and that the challenges we're facing are at the very least European, if not global. And that we will need to have a strong voice of Europe in this global order that is in the making. And that requires that we find consensus and that we find ways to work together. And since its creation, Europe has been overcoming crises and changes and political shifts. We always tend to think that this is the worst possible situation we are confronted with. But, you know, when you look back, and you, EPC, but also Elcano and all of us, when we look back, we see that we have been in a constant state of crisis, you know, in one way or another. And actually, we have continued to make progress. And the last 5 years are maybe the most extreme examples of being confronted with very unprecedented crises simultaneously and being able to overcome them successfully. So that's what gives me confidence going forward.
As you mentioned, I mean, we have been in a perma-crisis. One of the issues which we're facing is that we have a lot of priorities. We have a lot of issues which have to be addressed. You were talking about the 8 priority areas for the bank. Isn't it the case that we also have to look at making trade-offs, that there might be areas we cannot focus on as much as we have in the past? Is it not the case that we have to be able to make choices and prioritize certain issues above others?
Mm-hmm. Well, you will certainly have realized that these 8 priorities are absolutely interconnected. So I really don't see how we should make trade-offs, because they all contribute to growth. They all contribute to a stronger Europe. Let me just take one example, and this is a very common question and reflection these days. Well, we should not focus so much on climate change, because now the priority is security. But I am sure that we will agree that if there is one thing that the war of Russia against Ukraine has shown, is that our strategic autonomy is a matter of security, and it is a matter of energy security, and it is then urgent that we succeed in the green transition so that we can have more security. Likewise, cohesion policy ensures that the regions benefit from growth. We ensure that opportunities go with where talent is, because actually talent is equally distributed. It's not concentrated in large cities. It's not concentrated in different geographic parts of the world. It is quite reassuring to know that there is a quite similar percentage of talent distributed around the world. But it's very much concentrated in this room today, of course, but generally. So it's very important that we bring opportunities where talent is, and that we ensure that all regions progress, because we don't know where the groundbreaking technology is going to appear, and it may very well be in one of the cohesion regions. So all of it is really mutually reinforcing. And it is important that we understand that many things in Europe are not zero-sum games. They are mutually reinforcing activities that continue to drive us in the right direction of prosperity going forward.
You've mentioned that these are mutually reinforcing. But what we've seen, and in part also that explains why we're seeing this surge in the far right in the elections, is that citizens are questioning whether this can be done in a way which is fair, can be done in a just transition, given that we are also talking about enormous changes in our lifestyles. So how can we make sure that these transitions are fair and just, and that we have the political support of populations to continue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very good point. And I think and that's why I was mentioning the idea of urgency, because we need to get the positive sides of the green transition as soon as possible and minimize the transition costs. And it makes eminent economic sense. So the more we scale up already mature technologies, the cheaper they will become. And so they will become more affordable. And so it will be actually a very good investment. And we're seeing this in terms of the what's happening in terms of production. Between 2022 and 23, the International Agency for Energy estimates that the production of the 5 key technologies for the green transition has increased by 70%. between 1 year and the next. These 5 technologies are solar, wind, electrolyzers, batteries, and heat pumps. So the more we reach scale, the lower the average cost, and so the more affordable it will be. The more we invest and the faster we discover these breakthrough technologies that are going to allow to have clean steel, to decarbonize heavy industry, to make green hydrogen also profitable, the more we invest and the faster we do this transition, the cheaper the whole process will be. All economic analysis from the European Central Bank to all the international analysis are very clear that a well organized and orderly green transition is much more efficient than a disorderly transition that will be forced by the growing cost of the impact of climate change, which is also, I think, a very strong incentive for all of us to make this a success.
As ever in these events, we're under time pressure. I'll go back to the audience for questions at the end rather than now. But you've already mentioned security and also economic security, so I'll hand over and we'll move on to that topic.
Thank you. Thank you, President. I have liked a lot the tone and the content of your address. I think I have liked your address, especially for one thing. I believe that's to be. No, I was saying that I have liked the key address, especially because I think that we cannot afford to be pessimistic. To be pessimistic today is irresponsible. And I think we have to move forward and to fight the prestige, the cultural and intellectual prestige of pessimism that from time to time comes to here. But there are some data. You're saying fact remains. Data also remains. We are maybe lagging behind growth and prosperity of some other areas. And I would like to ask you how we can devise a political economy in Europe that make regulation and competitiveness compatible. Because the idea now in most of the private sector of the European economy is that regulation is fair. We need regulation, but regulation is putting a burden on the speed of innovation and adaptation of the European companies. How we can devise this political economy?
That's actually an extremely, it's probably the most challenging thing or the most challenging situation we will have going forward. And I have lived it very intensely concerning not green, but artificial intelligence, because we closed the artificial intelligence regulation, the AI Act, and there's some of the protagonists, one of the main characters that actually delivered it are here in the room. We closed it under the Spanish presidency. There was huge pressure from large, small companies inside and outside the EU. Many were arguing that this regulation was going to stifle innovation and growth. And yet, I think we all agree we cannot just let technology develop, which is going to have and is having such a profound impact in our economies and our lives, without ensuring that this does not lead to a worse outcome in terms of our societies. And we are here talking about understanding and putting a watermark in texts or images which have been tampered with by artificial intelligence. We are talking about ensuring good data protection and data management by large data managers. We are talking about protecting, in particular, the young and ensuring that there are no biases which are creating new cleavages and gaps in our society. So I think, again, there is a total agreement on the objectives, at least in Europe. If we were in China, that would maybe be a totally different conversation. So we may discuss, where the cursor has to stay, but we need to strike that balance because we need to preserve European values going forward. And in the area of the green transition, I think the last 5 years have been extremely productive in terms of regulation, also in terms of ambitious targets. Going forward, it will be important to see how to get this effectively done in a manner which continues to ensure that Europe is in the lead from a competitiveness and economic point of view. Again, I think there is a total agreement on this. We need to get it right in terms of how to achieve that result.
Thank you. The other thing that also the private sector is worried, it's about, and you have been talking about, we need to preserve European values. One of the European assets is the single market and competition policies. The idea that in some areas of the private sector also is very, very present, very usual, is how we are going to prevent or to preserve competition policy when we need to get a scale, because without the scale, it's not possible to be in this leading position of the both revolution. How we can handle this idea of national winners, national champions, single market, competition policy that really foster competition and innovation?
Yes. Well, as a ex-director general, deputy director general for competition, you will not be surprised to hear, I think the single market and a level playing field is at the heart of the success of the European economy throughout and since the creation of the communities. And the founding fathers, they were brilliant in so many ways, but one of them was to create competition policy from day one. So no hesitation on this. The internal market, the banking union, the capital market union, these should be very strong elements for us to continue to thrive from an economic point of view going forward. Still, that doesn't mean that policies don't need to adapt. Actually, my argument would be, in order for policies to remain pertinent, they need to adapt. They need to evolve. And I have been very outspoken on this publicly. So I'm not speaking now as president of the European Investment Bank, where I would have nothing to say about this question, actually. but rather, there are some areas, including digital and telecoms, where we really need to ensure that there is a single market in Europe. And we really need to make sure that we have a number of players that can play the role they should in driving these technologies forward. This is a very strong personal conviction I have. We had in the European Investment Bank, sometimes we have extraordinary moments. We had one this week when we had Annemieke van Vleuten. Although those of you that like cycling probably know her. She's a super champion from the Netherlands team in cycling. And she told us what the lesson for success for her was: accept, adapt, move on. I think these are quite wise words also when we're talking about other areas. Well, of course.
No, you are the president of the European Investment Bank. We are talking about investment. That's, to me, data kills narratives, and one of the ideas that data offers you, it's something like a paradox. We are investing more than United States as Europeans, even something like 3.5 percentage points of GDP, but these investments are not closing the gap in productivity. Maybe it's not just a topic of the volume of investment, but the quality of investment and where we are investing. How you can move the incentives to give the private sector some comfort that if they bet their money and their expectation on some of these new sectors, they are going to be able to have a payoff. How the European Investment Bank, in fact, can be a big player in the success of this security, European security and strategy, the autonomous strategy of Europe.
Yes, one of the most shared concepts is this investment gap and the growth capital gap for our brilliant, innovative startups, and this whole capital market union concept. And I have been working in that personally, very much involved in the whole capital market union regulation and drive for many years, and some in the room also have been accompanying that process. I think there is one unanimous assessment that progress has not been as large as it should. So going forward, what the European Investment Bank can do is build bottom-up instruments on the basis of its role, as I said in my introductory remarks, as a capital market union instrument. We are actually the largest player in green bonds. We were pioneering green bonds in 2007. We're some of the most important providers of green finance. Just the numbers I shared. Last year, we invested 39 billion euros in green finance. We have a large stock of green bonds outstanding. We are participating in the green bond initiative at worldwide level. We can bring together all these national institutions, European institutions, and see how we implement the green bond standard and the taxonomy going forward. So that's, I think, a very important area. But also, we are one of the largest venture capital investors in Europe. And we created through the European Investment Fund. And we created last year, with the contribution of some member states and our own funds, the European Tech Champions Initiative, which is a great success. We've mobilized close to 1 billion euros already. The private investment funds are growing to be able to operate with the EIB. I think going forward, we need to also build on this basis and see whether we can create a larger, deeper capital basis here. So there are some other areas that we are exploring together with other institutions, public-private. Let's sit together and see how we can make it a fact, and then in parallel, support all the policy initiatives that I'm sure the European Commission will put on the table and will be hotly debated in the European Parliament and in the member states.
Thanks very much. Maybe just picking up something you were talking about in the initial remarks, defense and security. You were talking about already starting to become more active in this field, changing the rules internally. And you also emphasized that all of these topics are interconnected. Now, defense and security is controversial. There's often criticism about working with defense companies, working with the defense industry. How do you see that area going forward for the bank? Is this going to be a core priority in the coming period?
It may be controversial. We all didn't want, of course, this to be a priority. We would much better continue with the dividends of peace that we've had for these decades, and not having to invest in security and defense. This certainly has provided Europe with a great advantage. I don't think the current geopolitical context would warrant any confidence on that front. So it is clear we need to support and step up Europe's security and defense capabilities, also as a deterrent effect to ensure peace on our continent. And so the European Investment Bank Group has already earmarked 8 billion euros for security and defense. We have only invested 2 billion euros so far. And so we're focusing now in accelerating the deployment of the 6 billion euros remaining. We've created this one-stop shop, a single window. Only this week, I have been contacted by 2 private funds that want to see how to invest in this sector. We are doing a roadshow in the different member states. Vice President De Groot from the Netherlands is the one leading this policy area inside the bank. And I am persuaded that in the second part of the year, we will see good European projects coming up. And I insist in the concept of European, because what is important is that we develop and deploy technologies that are really European and that can provide us with the necessary efficient means to defend our perimeter. There is no economic prosperity without security on the ground. So yet again, it's clear these are cross-related priorities that we need to deploy and to support in parallel.
Talking a bit more about the prioritization and also competition. Now, clearly, a lot of defense is going to have to be through public investment. But how do we actually manage to also get private investment into the sector? And does that not lead to a competition between different areas for investment? How do we achieve that the overall volume of investment actually goes up, given that we have an enormous need of investment across all of those transformations?
Well, that's why I was also highlighting that the funds are moving, and private money is moving to support not only security and defense, of course. And the European Investment Bank Group, I think, has a very important role to play in three dimensions. Maybe they can be summarized in two. First is the financial support and the fact that we de-risk investments. We have been discussing with the European Commission the success of our wind package. What we did in December is providing cross guarantees so that wind farms would be invested and deployed. Because the wind manufacturers, the equipment manufacturers, and the energy producers, they require guarantees from each other. And due to the large exposures they have to the banks, the private banks were not ready to provide them with more guarantees. So the European Investment Bank is providing the cross guarantees. We're making these projects possible. They would not be possible without the cross guarantees. Likewise, we are now financing 3 vaccine production facilities in Africa. We are doing the maturity transformation between the liquidity needs now and the funds that will be flowing in the future so as to make these projects possible. So it is not only whether there are advantageous financing conditions in the sense of less basis points, which is of course an obsession we have every week. Are we competitive or not in terms of the financing conditions? It is the fact that many times we are absolutely indispensable from a financial point of view for projects to take risk by de-risking these investments. Investments in Ukraine is another clear example. Thanks to the mandates and guarantees from the European budget, the EIB is providing very important investments into Ukraine right now. I will go to Berlin next week. I'm going to be signing some important agreements with the Ukrainian government. These projects would not be possible without the European Investment Bank capacity. So that's one area where we can really mobilize private investment. But the second area is that actually the European Investment Bank provides a seal of excellence. The technical quality, the advisory services mean that we can identify which can be better projects for Europe that reflect the European value and not only the interest of one member state or one promoter, at one point in time. And I think this second, more qualitative element that has been built through a decade, and I am very comfortable to say this because I just joined 6 months ago. So this is something that has been built in the past decades. This technical excellence is also a very important element because once the EIB says, yes, I will finance this project, private investors say, okay, I go in. And these two are two of the key assets of the European Investment Bank, which I think we can build on going forward.
Maybe just to pick up the point you made on support for Ukraine, it would be great if you could expand a bit on what the role of the bank is likely to be in supporting Ukraine and certainly in reconstruction, because there's another enormous investment need going forward. And of course, it links also to security and defense.
Yeah. Well, we have already disbursed 2 billion euros to Ukraine. We are probably the largest investment partner to Ukraine right now. We are working on 4 kinds of areas. First, large national critical infrastructures, energy and transport, most especially. Secondly, projects of a more municipal, local dimension in the cities of Ukraine to rebuild hospitals, kindergarten, schools, houses, water infrastructures, and other public services. Thirdly, supporting the private sector, and in particular, Ukrainians' SMEs. And finally, advisory services. And we are also working on a new instrument, not new at national level, but new at European level, which would be a pan-European export credit guarantee, so that we can ensure that all member states, the SMEs in all member states, can export to Ukraine, and so contribute now and in their reconstruction in a safe manner. So I think that what we are currently doing with Ukraine shows the immense synergies of the European budget, providing the guarantees and the mandates, the EIB deploying the resources and multiplying, leveraging the capacity of the European budget on the ground, and supporting Europe's priority right now, which is obviously to support Ukraine, the resilience of the country now, and the reconstruction of the country, I hope, as soon as possible once the war is over.
Thank you. We have a little bit of time for questions. So I propose to take them together and then give you a chance to pick and choose what you want to answer. So anyone want to come in with a question at that point? So I've seen these three, and that's I'll take them all, and then we'll come back to you.
Hi, hello, good morning. This is Gregorio Sorgio. I'm a journalist from Political Europe. The last time you spoke here in Brussels, you said that the EIB would like to replace the current gearing ratio, that it's currently a constraint. When do you expect this decision to be reached? Is it something we can already expect in the meeting in June with finance ministers? And could you clarify what the end goal of this idea of this proposal would be? Is it for the EIB to play a bigger role in financing priorities that would usually be financed through the EU budget?
Hello, Thomas Moe Nilsson at Euractiv. I have almost an identical question about the gearing ratio, but by how much do you think it would be changed? So from 250% to 300% or 500%? Could you give us a, I don't know, ballpark figure for how much it'll be changed? Thank you.
Thank you for the floor, Dmytro Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. In your introductory speech, you mentioned that EIB succeed to avoid the worst case scenario in the current war circumstances. So could you please elaborate what kind of the best scenario still ahead, and what kind of tools we can invent or to expect to avoid that unfortunate situation? And another word you pronounce is reconstruction. There in Ukraine, there is not that much talking, but deeds, not to rebuild all the old infrastructure, but rather modernize it, to maybe to feed some kind of Green Deal and other modern and sophisticated developments. So please, could you elaborate how the bank supporting that kind of projects?
Yes, thank you very much. Now, on the gearing ratio, indeed, we expect that it will be removed from the statutes. Just some background for the colleagues, that it will be removed from the statutes as a statutory constraint on the meeting of the Board of Governors of the 21st of June. For the actual numbers, stay tuned. I am glad to hear there's an interest, because we will certainly have communication activity on that important Board of Governors, where we are putting to them the 8 priorities and the removal of these statutory constraints. So conversely, to many other multilateral development institutions have already removed these kind of nominal constraints from the statutes. They are outdated, they date back to the 50s, and they are not risk sensitive. In the case of the bank, it establishes that the balance sheet cannot exceed 250% of the capital. And the capital is also enshrined in the statutes. So effectively, this regularly has been requiring either a movement of reserves to capital or a change of the gearing ratio. It is a particular constraint in two instances: for mandates and guarantees, since it is not risk sensitive. It does not take account of the risk management of the bank. And secondly, capital investments. So the activity of the European Investment Fund, equity, quasi-equity, all these investments that actually all our shareholders want us to do more going forward. So that is the angle. The angle is, in order for us to deliver on the expectations and the mandates that we get from our shareholders and from the European Commission, we need to remove this outdated nominal constraint. If this is removed, there is no need to increase the capital of the bank, whereas other multilateral development institutions are having to have capital increases. It is really outstanding when one looks at the numbers, and you were saying, facts matter and data matter. So with 22 billion euros of paid-in capital, the EU member states have mobilized 5 trillion euros in investments. We have financed all the large infrastructures in Europe, not to talk about education systems, health systems, and now innovation and the green investments for the green transition. The bank has been profitable since its inception. Those profits feed reserves, which are enabling us to continue to do a very profitable business. It has really been such a positive proposition to European countries that's why maybe I'm also quite confident, that going forward, whatever happens in the elections, the European Investment Bank Group will continue to play a key role in contributing to close Europe's investment gap. And your question on yesterday, I had an interview which will be placed on the Ukrainian TV in the course of the meeting in Berlin. And I thought it was really inspiring how the questions that were coming from the Ukrainian journalists were very much aligned with yours. How can we build back better? What will be your priorities in the reconstruction? So they are already thinking. And indeed, I said, obviously, the green transition, the building back better from the perspective of sustainability of the country will be one of the top areas. And it is an area where the European Investment Bank is particularly well placed, being the climate bank and having this very strong expertise. Many people are starting more and more to think about this future, which would certainly be a good scenario to be working on.
Thank you, and I'll hand over for.
Thank you, President, for this very inspiring conversation. If I have to try to summarize and to tell you my takeaways, I will start first by using your last words in your presentation. Use wise your vote next Sunday. I think this idea that we need more Europe, not less Europe, it's really very important. We need, in some way, some Monty Python moment. I have been inspired by your recent contribution to Project Syndicate. What has that Europe for us? And when you start to read how many things we have got in these 5 years, in this last cycle, it's really very inspiring. It's when you are listening in the film, infrastructure, the roads. Well, we have machines, we have a sense of unity against authoritarian regimes, against aggression. We have been legitimized. And this has been extremely important: green revolution, technology, regulation, all these things. But maybe more deep than that is that we have created in the last 5 years a political economy to get these agreements that has to be used to face the challenges that are coming. And I was saying that to be pessimistic in these times is irresponsible. Because if we are pessimists and we are stuck, but our pessimism, if we don't move, I think it's going to be extremely difficult to deal with the challenge that we are going to face for sure. Therefore, this kind of contribution, your energy, your optimism, your knowledge about what is the European Investment Bank in just 3 months makes me very happy and makes me optimism. And please, I will ask the audience to join us and to thanks Nadia for this excellent conversation.